And thanks to everyone for being here and for this wonderful occasion. And Kristen, I'm so jealous of you because you have a vision for your letters book and it has a beginning and an end, and I have no idea what I'm doing. It's absolutely terrifying. I started this project just before the pandemic, right? So I signed contract with Columbia University Press. Ron Padgett says, yes, you be the guy. And I just, oh, this will be easy, this will be fun. And it's fun, but there are thousands of letters, and I simply have no idea what the shape of this book is going to be like. So, yeah. Anyway, this talk I'll try and be as short as possible. It's going to start kind of unserious, and time allowing, it'll end on a serious note. I hope that doesn't prove a drag for everyone. But anyway. I just, what drew me to the project initially was Brainard's resistance to seriousness, right? There's such a delight and looseness to his style. And the letters that I've come across are really fantastic examples, I think, of how anything, even resembling pompousness, must be squashed. So take, for example, this letter that Brainard wrote to Bill Berkson. I'm going to start right here, okay? I felt, and this is in response to a letter that Berkson sent Brainard saying you should really check out the Barnett-Newman show, it's great. And Brainard responds, I felt a little stab in my heart when you said you liked the Newman. I admit he is good, but he is everything I don't believe in. I wish I could explain how much I hate him, but I can't. It is not his work itself I detest, it is everything that he stands for. If I ever turn into a real painter, I will be a total reaction from him, in the totally opposite direction. I cannot read a word he writes anymore, as it makes me so mad. Art is not God, art is not that serious, and art is not that boring, and snotty, and stupid, etc. See what I mean? I don't really think it is fair to judge a painter by what he says, but really, he is to me a total pain in the ass. I am sorry, I cannot explain exactly why. All I know is that to me, if art has an enemy, it is Barnett Newman. He is like death. So yeah, it's totally funny, but also really harsh. And so clearly of a piece, I think, with his friends, mostly poets as we know, their hostility, I think, towards rhetoric that would seek to raise an artwork hierarchically above the pleasures of a cartoon, a Pepsi, a rock and roll song. And yet I would point people to this what to me is now a very kind of a meaningful and significant, even sad moment in the letter, which is, if I ever turn to a real painter, right? Because one of the themes that I've come across in going through years and years of Brainard's correspondences, he didn't actually think he was good enough, right? Especially when it came to oils. Anyway, going back to seriousness, and oh yeah, that's just how he signs off practically all of his letters. Love Joe. Going back to some of his flower paintings, for example. Let's see, can I get to this? Okay, sorry. There we go. Blossom paintings, gardens, collages. Brainard writes, there's not much you can do with a painting, but look at it. And I'm just thinking about how we can perhaps try and see Brainard's images as experiential phenomena that strive for beauty, humor, sorrow, surprise, as opposed to text ripe for scholarly analysis. Those are some of Brainard's Nancy pieces. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with those. Celebrated series. And I'm thinking too of Nancy alongside his I Remember. The letters help me show, or I hope they let me show, how many of the themes associated with works like these are first invoked in the correspondence, okay? So references that Brainard makes to key texts such as Berrigan's sonnets, Lita Horneck's Culture, which he writes consistently, they're really brought to life in these many and often hilarious reports to his friends. I also was surprised to see how so many of the social and political conditions that Brainard lived through, from the Vietnam War and gay rights movements of the 60s and early 70s, to the AIDS crisis of the mid to late 1980s, shaped, if somewhat elliptically, the content of Brainard's correspondence and kind of offer us an intimate perspective on these transformative historical moments. I'm really charmed by Brainard, as I'm sure lots of you are, right? He's totally charming. And I'm especially excited when he starts talking about his own works. Take, for example, the Nancy images, right, which are produced from 1963 through 1978. So Nancy is was often used as a derogatory term, right, a slang word for a gay man, which, as Brainard's friend Anne Lauterbach astutely points out in an essay on Brainard, became the source of, as she put it, repeated visual verbal puns that were not motivated by shame, but by its reverse, candor. And, you know, so Brainard declares that his favorite flower, whenever anyone asks him, what's your favorite flower, it's the pansy, right? And he makes numerous works in which they appear, just some of those pansies that we love. So imagine my delight when I came across a letter from 1965 to Brainard's friends, the poet Ron Padgett, and Ron Padgett's partner, Pat Padgett, which included the following series of images in this particular order. So there were a whole bunch of images that he included in the letter itself, and these are some of them in the order in which they were presented. So this is, can you see that? Okay, this is how I look in my glasses. This is how I look without any clothes on. This is how I look without my clothes on censored. This is how I would look like if I were Nancy. This is how Nancy would look like if she had a dick. So I read Joe's choice to put these images in this order as a kind of narrative in which he conflates or otherwise creates kind of affinities, right, between his body and Nancy's, male with female. I'm also really interested in the Padgetts as a kind of relatively conventional heterosexual couple, right? I feel like Brainard in this letter is staging a kind of sly and gentle confrontation here with his friends. Like, he's saying, you know, look at my dick. I'm a girl, I'm a Nancy, right? It's a little edge there. Making this all the more delightful, I think, are the details in the letter itself, like these following excerpts. So this is in the same letter that he put all those images in, right? Dear Pat and Ron, last night I went to the Russian tea room after a Miss Julie rehearsal, and there sitting at a table was Tony Perkins with a producer friend of Kenwood's. So we said hello, and I really did shake hands with him, sat down and had drinks. Tony was eating a vanilla ice cream sundae with blueberry sauce. When it had melted, he said it looked like a Paul Jenkins. At any rate, he was nice, though a bit dumb. I got his autograph, and he said he was going, etc., etc. He then describes how he goes for his usual night out alone at an automat in Times Square called Toffanetti's. There is something very comforting in doing the same thing over and over. It must be a bit like being married. I mean, the security of it all. So I can't help but find a very simple pleasure in knowing that Brainard came across Tony Perkins, right, the actor from Psycho, Norman Bates, at the Russian tea room. So Perkins' homosexuality was a pretty well-known, you know, secret among the cultural set in New York City, and the fact that he was headed over to see Brainard's show at the Allen Gallery makes the detail all the more delicious for those of us obsessed with these minor things. So people belonging in this kind of queer Manhattan coterie, bumping into each other, seeing each other's films and movies. Well, Brainard's letters really bring this to life. This anecdote is then followed up with Brainard making an analogy between going to the movies regularly, doing the same thing over and over, as being a bit like being married. Strikes me as all the more hilarious when considered alongside those, you know, what to me seem like pretty queer images that Brainard included in this letter to his very married friends. There's a kind of fun naughtiness, a dig, if you will, at the boring married couple who can only read from a distance about the fancy-free Joe Brainard trotting from cafe to movie to art show, and so on, without the anchor of compulsory heterosexuality dragging him down. I mentioned a little thing about oils, right? And this is a real theme that's come across in the correspondence that I've gone through already. It's a real struggle for Brainard, and it's a struggle that proves his undoing, as by around 1979 he decided he simply couldn't work anymore in that medium because, as I said, he wasn't good enough. We also gain insights into what Brainard was thinking as he shifts into representational painting. And that's a move inspired particularly by his engagement with post-abstract expressionist painter Fairfield Porter. So regarding this painting of his and his long-term companion and lover, Kenwood Elmsley's dog, Whippoorwill, Brainard wrote to Porter, "Your letter spurred me to a spell of trying to do some larger paintings. Actually, two, both of Whippoorwill on a putrid green velvet sofa downstairs. the putrid green of the sofa, so much of, being one of my biggest problems. However, thanks to what light does to old velvet, one of them, I love that, one of them is okay. Rather, thanks to exaggerating that a bit. But aside from any real basic desire to paint big, my biggest problem probably concerns my preoccupation with an even surface, which becomes quite a chore on a large scale, which probably has something to do with what you were talking about as to oils being basically a bit dirty to Americans. But actually I don't mind being rough or even sloppy, so long as I am totally and evenly so. So Brainard's perceived failure to be consistently even, and this is someone who ranged across so many genres, so it makes me think, like, how could he even aspire to such a thing, right? Seemed to me to be a sort of key, if tragic, window into Brainard's thinking in the early to mid 1970s. I told you it was going to end on a really depressing note. For all his claims against seriousness, in favor of what we might think of it as a kind of radical whimsy, Brainard, this letter shows, still clings to relatively old-fashioned values of craftsmanship as you know, the sign of a real artist. I think it's a revelation, really, for anyone seduced into thinking Brainard was always and forever not taking himself seriously. I see I have 3 more minutes, so I'm just going to go point to Nick. You know, you talk about the archives as being a very emotional space. Oh my God, especially lately, right? I came across this letter that Brainard wrote, the last letter that I found that Brainard wrote to Bill Berkson in 1992. So he knows he's dying, essentially, of AIDS. Brainard dies of AIDS in 1994, though he'd been suffering its effects for at least 4 years. He keeps it to himself, and the letters are in a sense, loud in their silence. Like, his friends never mention it, right? It's not until the very final months of his life that people actually use the word AIDS. It really speaks to that moment in time when people were scared of even saying it out loud, right? And he never told anyone. For a while, he didn't let on, except for very brief casual references to thrush, right? Like rashes on his neck, which we realize now are Kaposi sarcoma, probably, object exhaustion, etc. And then I come across this letter, and I totally lost it. It's this letter to Berkson that he writes in 92, the final letter. And Nick, maybe you can tell me if you know that Berkson received more letters from Brainard on it. But this is the last one that I found in the pile. And it's just, for me, read like a gift, like a kind of reverse memento mori, right? In which Brainard offers Berkson a series of images that embody a love of life so deep and so sweet that I could barely stand to read it, you know? And then when I did read it in the archive, I was on my own with this, you know, verstinkende mask on my face. And I just lost it. It was really, and that totally scared the archivist. She was like, holy shit, there's a nut in the archive. But it's so gorgeous. Dear Bill, let's see, it's Monday morning, just after breakfast, orange juice, cinnamon roll, banana. And today promises to be a perfect summer day. Blue sky, sunny and warm, a rarity this odd and cool summer. So picture me this afternoon out in the middle of the lake, white swimming trunks, floating around on a bright red air mattress, blissed out of my mind. Though, of course, anything could happen between then and now. And really, that's about it for news. I read and sleep and eat, miss you, and time flies. Black beans are soaking in a big bowl of water on the kitchen counter for supper tonight, with basmati rice and leftover ham and orange jello made from scratch, with maybe heavy cream and blueberries on top, a sprig of mint. And so now you know everything. Happy birthday, lots of love, Joe. P.S. All best to Lynn. It moves so beautifully, doesn't it? Just that series of images as kind of gifts. This is what I'm not going to tell you I'm in pain. I'm not going to tell you I'm dying. But have these images for me, these series of images to be remembered by. And so the attention to minor details is something that we've all been talking about here, right? All day. Attention to minor details as embodying so much that is great about Brainard's work across genres, but tempered, to me anyway, by the absolute ominousness of that phrase between then and now, as opposed to between now and then. It's like between then and now. It's just unbearable. Anyway, I'm going to end out. My fear is that A, I'm very unstable, you know, because I'm reacting so strongly. And B, like, how will people get this if they don't have the context, right? Because I called up my beloved partner Yenny. I was like, oh, it's the most beautiful letter. And she was like, oh, you know, it's just not so, it's sweet, but it's not so tragic. So, I don't know. I'll end there. It's just it's a hard job, and how to juggle insisting on a kind of context which lends a pathos to this letter that otherwise might not have it is one tiny problem that I'm facing as I face a mountain of Brainardia. Anyway, thanks.